In this film, we'll discuss the history of film. The history of this art form stretches far and wide, from the up-to-date 4K projectors seen in theatres today, all the way back to the 17th century of the magic lantern. The magic lantern contained the elements that we still see today in some film projectors: a light source, a mechanism to move frames through a light-proof box, and lenses for compressing and projecting images onto a screen. When it was first seen in the early 16th century, it provided a highly popular way for the uneducated populations to escape from the toil and mundanity of peasant life. The magic lantern used a mirror behind a light source to direct as much of the light as possible through a small rectangular sheet of glass, a lantern slide, on which was a painting or a photographic image to be projected. It was then projected onwards into a lens at the front of the lantern. The lens was adjusted to focus the slide onto a projection screen, which could simply be a white wall, and therefore formed an enlarged image of the slide on the screen. Apart from sunlight, the only light sources available at the time of invention in the 16th century were candle and oil lamps, which were very inefficient and provided very dim projected images. This was an important invention at the time, as it enabled storytellers to present their work in a much more visual way and display it to a much larger audience at once. It was possible to tell stories by displaying various slides in a row. The next step in terms of animations was the thaumatrope. This was less a film tool but more of a toy. What it was a disc with two linked images on either side, like in my example. We can see there is a bird on one side and a cage on the other. This disc had a piece of string attached on either side, and when it was spun, a concept called persistence of vision blended the two together. Persistence of vision is the theory that an image remains on the retina for around a quarter of a second after it has vanished, which explains how the thaumatrope, as well as other inventions like the zoetrope, provided this illusion of movement. The original thaumatrope is sketchy, as some prehistoric ones have been found in French caves. However, the modern invention of it is credited to Jean Arrington Paris in 1824, as he used it to show the effects of persistence of vision to the Royal College of Physicians. The zoetrope is a device shrouded in mystery. The main argument surrounding the invention of the zoetrope is that some believe a variety of zoetrope was invented around 100 BC by the inventor Ding Huan, but the exact nature of the device, which is commonly misinterpreted from its unreliable sources, as well as the historian's definition of what a zoetrope is, are both very unclear. However, the basic drum-like form of the zoetrope was created in 1833 or 1834 by British mathematician William George Horner, who was aware of the recently invented and closely related phenakiscope disc, which we'll cover later. Horner's drum had viewing slits between the pictures, and he called his invention the daedaleum, from the Greek word daedaleus. However, the zoetrope never truly became popular until the 1860s, when a variant with the viewing slits on a level above the pictures, which allowed the use of easily replaceable continuous strips of images. This variant was patented by English inventor Milton Bradley and American inventor William F. Lincoln. It was Lincoln who used the term zoetrope, which means wheel of life. The close rival in terms of invention and purpose is the phenakistoscope, which was invented in 1832. This follows the same principle of the zoetrope, however it is laid out differently. Whereas the zoetrope uses a drum and viewing slits, the phenakistoscope uses a disc with a rod down the middle, with viewing slits in between the images. The user would hold it up to a mirror and spin it and see the images moving through the slits. This device was developed by a lot of people, as they all built upon the Greek mathematician Euclid's principle. However, the original idea was firmly established by the Belgian Joseph Plateau. Although this is an important invention as far as animation, I don't believe it's as important as the zoetrope. The reason behind this is that the phenakistoscope and daedaleus could only be viewed by one person at a time, whereas the zoetrope, as opposed to the original daedaleus, could be viewed by several people at once. This opened up the gates slightly to public shows of these crude animations, which I believe is a bigger step in terms of the history of film, which at its core is a public art form, which is designed to be shown to the masses as opposed to a single person at a time. The next advancement was a slight adaptation from the zoetrope. It was developed by Emile Reynaud in 1877 and was called the praxinoscope. It followed the same basic design as the rotating drum as a zoetrope, however along the main cylinder in the centre of the drum there was a mirror. The viewer would look into the mirror and see the animation as opposed to squinting through the slot. I believe this was a fairly big step as far as projection goes, as it was becoming more and more easier to view these short animations than before. The next advancement really helps to show what people will do to win an argument. In 1878, Edward Muybridge was asked by ex-governor of California to settle a bet as to whether horses' hooves leave the ground when they gallop. Muybridge agreed and set up 12 cameras, each on its own tripwire. Each camera would be tripped whenever the horse went by it. This successfully captured all the stages of galloping. Muybridge drew up his findings and developed a projector to show case findings. This has become the first true example of frame-by-frame stop motion. I believe that Muybridge's 5 years of work into the study of animal movement was critical in showing that realistic animations could be created through different means other than drawing. It also helped to show more naturalistic animations could be created. His research was also important outside the world of film and biology, as he also helped to show people in more detail how animals moved in sequence. sequence. By far, in my opinion, the biggest advancement in early film took place in 1882. We return to the developer of the praxinoscope, Emile Reynaud. This time used his original creation and used more mirrors than a lantern to project moving drawings onto a screen. Although this was still the early stages, this was a giant leap in terms of public projectors. Even though it was only drawings as opposed to anything like a real film, the praxinoscope on which it was based was an incredibly versatile device. For example, Muybridge's horse dish showing the horses galloping or a bison running could have been placed inside Reynaud's praxinoscope projector, and the films could have been showed in the same way. This in some ways reflects the versatility that today's cinemas have with a variety of films being shown in the same format. Although Edison and Dickson had invented a peep show called the kinetoscope, which allowed watchers to view true moving images, I do not believe it is important as the work of the Lumiere brothers. The Lumiere name was famous as the most successful producer of photographic plates in Europe, and in 1894 a local kinetoscope exhibitor in Paris asked the Lumiere father, Antoine Lumiere, to produce films that are cheaper to buy than Edison's. However, he returned from his trip and said to his sons Augustus and Louis that they can do better, and that they must get the film out of the peephole and onto the screen. Well, the Lumiere brothers did just that, and on the 19th of March, it was the only sunny day on the new cinematographer, which means in Greek, writing the movement. The first film was shot in front of the Lumiere factory and was verified as the first film, as a journalist from the time later described a dog, a bike and a horse, which can be seen in the film. It was here that the history of film invention stopped and the history of filmmaking began. This in essence helped to create the first readily available cinema. Although films were shot at a lower frame rate than those of Edison's, his being 42 frames a second and the Lumiere's being 16, their films were cheaper to make and show, and because the camera and projection was all rolled into it, it meant it was very easy to set up and broadcast. And last but not least, we come to the first piece of edited footage. It was seen in a film called The Life of an American Firefighter. As we can see in the clip, there are two channels, one of the man and the other of the woman in the blaze in the circular field. This first piece of editing was done by Edwin S. Porter, whose life as a travelling projectionist had helped him understand what the audience really wanted, and something that runs through all films today: narrative. Not only did Porter show a story through his films in editing, he also developed a crude form of cross-dissolving as opposed to the standard cut. This was revolutionary, and although filmmaking was in its second decade when this took place, it was still essential and expanded the horizons of what could be done through film.